Gravis UltraSound, both hate it and laughed at the same time. The plug and play is one of my all-time favorites. It was actually my second sound card, or third if you consider a PCSpeak a sound card. For some people it's just a hassle not worth the time. For me it was always sort of a challenge, but mostly a delight due to its outstanding sound quality and its cracking wavetable. Now it took me about a month to properly test the bloody thing, so enjoy the video. Gravis sound cards are quite unique, even more so since Advanced Gravis was probably the only Canadian company ever existed, otherwise they've got just ice hockey, maple syrup and bass, I guess. The first Gravis UltraSound sound card, which is now called Classic, was released in 1992 and lacked proper Sound Blaster compatibility in games, so its reception wasn't exactly warm. It was a marvel of a card that was. It was one of the first PC sound cards. They used sample-based synthesis, or wavetable synthesis, which is pretty much interchangeable term, even though some say it's not. Then in 1994 it was UltraSound Max, which was pretty much the same card, but Gravis added Windows Sound System compatibility, which was useless in those games, and everywhere else really. Then in 1995 UltraSound Plug and Play came out and it was a game changer. At least for me, because I bought it at around that time. The box Gravis came up with is certainly not a masterpiece. It's rather bland and ugly compared to the previous Gravis cards, which had bloody cracking design, especially the UltraSound Max. Whenever I see a PCB with a reddish color, I always think of Gravis. It was their signature PCB back in the day. Unlike all the other Gravis models, which sported Gravis' own GF1 chip, Plug and Play's gone another route. It's got AMD Interwave, which was better in every way. I don't wanna bore you with some useless specs, but here you are. It could record and playback sounds simultaneously at 16-bit 48 kHz and use 32 sound channels. The GF1 could do only 44 kHz and only at 14 channels. Every additional channel deteriorated the sound quality, so when you go to 32 channels, you get only 19 kHz of sound quality. The Interwave's frequency response ranges from 20 Hz to 20 kHz, which is pretty much the range humans can hear. Signal to noise ratio is not that great though, at least on paper, it's just 80 dB. The Interwave can also handle reverb and chorus, while the GF1 can't. There were two plug and play models, Pro and, well, non-Pro. The PNP Pro had this bit of PCB populated by half meg of RAM, which was kind of snake oil, because every PNP model Pro or non-Pro has got two 30-pin SIM slots for memory upgrade. You can add up to 8 MB of RAM and that's certainly better than half meg in it. And when you add the memory to non-Pro model, the additional half meg in Pro version is practically useless. The back panel is rather ordinary, game port, line in, line out and mic in, that's it. There's one IDE CD-ROM connector on board which needs an additional TSR program to work. Then you can connect your CD-ROM audio output here, pretty standard stuff. Unlike the previous Gravis cards that needed this breakout box for external MIDI modules to work, Plug and Play doesn't. You can connect whatever MIDI device to its game port, set it in the setup and that's it. The good thing about this breakout box is not only you can connect external MIDI modules, but also two different joysticks instead of just one directly to a card. What's a bit disappointing though is a lack of Wave Blaster header, so you can't connect any wavetable daughter board. Well, not that anybody needs that with the Gravis' own excellent wavetable. Moreover, you can still connect any external MIDI module if you need to. There were also lots of clone sound cards based on the Interwave chip. I have no idea how they sound, but they all look rather cheaply made. Except for maybe Compaq. People usually trash Gravis for a horrible installation procedure in DOS and sometimes for no working at all. And well, they are partly right. The installation procedure is a bit retarded. In the original box you've got a CD and a couple of diskettes. For the installation you need both. For the driver itself you need the diskette, and to get MIDI working you need the CD. For DOS it goes like this. First you need to install the driver from the second diskette. It's gonna install all necessary files and then it's gonna run setup where you need to set proper ports, IRQs, DMAs and stuff. To get the MIDI working, you need instrument patches which are on the CD. To make it clear, The diskettes don't include MIDI patches, and the CD doesn't include the driver. Whoever came up with that must have been stoned or retarded or something. I'm gonna try the installation on various test rigs to make sure it's working everywhere. The first one and my main test rig is a Pentium motherboard with wire chipset. For the installation I took out all unnecessary stuff. I've got just PCI VGA card, which is number 9 S33064, and the Gravis of course. Also, I've disabled all unnecessary crap in BIOS, USB, LPT, serial ports, etc. Now, I used the second diskette to install the driver. It went perfectly fine. I didn't even have to mess about with the IRQ allocation settings in the BIOS. Then I had to install instrument patches from the CD, again no problem whatsoever. So I tried the same thing a couple of times with different hardware, Pentium board with Intel chipset, slot 1 board with AGP VGA card, 486 motherboard with a VLB VGA card, 386 motherboard with an ISA VGA card, and even Pentium Pro. Every single time it worked perfectly fine. Maybe I was just lucky with all the hardware setups, but I certainly can't test it with every piece of hardware out there. Gravis sound cards had always solved a problem with compatibility. It wasn't particularly Gravis' fault, but rather game developers and their support, or lack thereof. There are numerous patches for lots of games to get Gravis cards working. I'm gonna test most of them, at least the ones I've got. One would expect the PNP to be backwards compatible with all the Gravis cards. It is, but it needs at least half meg of RAM for some reason, otherwise it just doesn't work. The Interwave chip is also compatible with Crystal CS4231 found on Gravis Max, which should be compatible with Windows Sound System. Even though the Windows Sound System was a useless piece of hardware, I tried setting up a couple of games to use the Windows Sound System. While the Interwave really probably is technically compatible, it uses different input-output ports, so in the end it's not compatible really. The only game I got working was Heroes of Might and Magic, which didn't ask for a port in its setup. Gravis Plug and Play is incompatible with pretty much anything, so they packed in 4 emulators to support various sound cards, or sound systems if you will. First is SBOS, which is purely Sound Blaster emulator. You need to run IW SBOS BAT and then set a Sound Blaster, Sound Blaster Pro or a Netlib in a game's setup. A Sound Blaster Pro is technically unsupported, but sometimes it works and it sounds much better. Then there's the Mega EM or Mega M or whatever you want to call it, which can emulate the Sound Blaster, General MIDI, Roland Sound Canvas and the MT32. The program is surprisingly called Mega M. You can feed it some command line arguments to change the emulation mode to General MIDI, MT32, etc. Or you can set it up in the ME setup, which is some sort of UI. Then there's UltraMid, which is not exactly an emulator but a simple TSR program needed by some games to enable a native Gravis MIDI support. And lastly LoadPad, which is also not an emulator but a program that's also needed by some games to load instrument patches to memory before playing the game. Getting Sound Blaster or Red Lib working is generally quite easy. You just need to fire up either SBOS or Mega M, that's it. Both of them work perfectly in terms of emulating sounds. I had only two issues. The SBOS didn't work in Duke Nukem 2, it always crashed the computer for some reason, but the Mega M worked perfectly fine. I found out it was Sound Blaster sounds in the setup that was causing the crash, so after I set it to Adlib sounds, it worked just fine, even though the sounds are rubbish like this. The second issue was with Mega M in Alien Breed, where the music worked but sounds didn't. The SBOS worked perfectly fine this time. Other than that, I haven't encountered any other problems related to sound. Now the FM synthesis. Gravis doesn't have any hardware chip that produces FM synth, so the only way for Gravis is somehow use its wavetable instruments to emulate the FM synth. Both SBOS and Mega M use different methods to achieve the same thing, and unfortunately you can hear that in pretty much every game. While the SBOS does a very good job in most games, the Mega M usually sounds like shite. That being said, I really fancy how the SBOS emulates the FM synth. Sometimes it sounds much better than the actual FM synth, at least to me. What however surprised me probably the most was the Mega M's MT32 emulation. When a sound card tries to emulate the MT32, it's always far cry from perfect. I mean in terms of music quality or simple compatibility. The Gravis PNP, or more like Mega M, breaks the mold here. The music is not horrible, games sound rather good, and some even excellent. But what was a massive surprise to me was the compatibility. You see, normally when a sound card emulates the MT32, either as an actual emulator or as an interface you connect the MT32 to, it does that in so-called UART mode, which works in about half of the games that support the MT32. To get the support for all games, you need something that works in an intelligent mode, which is either Roland MPU401 or some MPU401 clone card, but there's only one sound card I know of that supports the intelligent mode, and that's the Ensoniq Soundscape S2000. And now I know of other sound cards that can do that, Gravis UltraSound Plug and Play. I tried about 30 games that need intelligent mode, and it worked in every single one of them, so I reckon it works in the rest as well. What's quite annoying though is that sometimes you get hanging notes using Mega M. Not often, I just got it in 2 games, but what's quite interesting though is that Mega M doesn't work if you've got more than 64MB of RAM and using Gravis sound card with the GF1 chip. However, it's working just fine with the PNP for some reason, which I'm not complaining about. There's a minor drawback with these emulators though. You can't use Gravis in games if you've got Mega M or SBOS loaded. It cooks up the sound or it doesn't work at all. So you can't combine Gravis and Sound Blaster in a setup. By default, the SBOS and Mega M use the sound bank inside the 1MB ROM on board, so changing sound banks makes no difference really. I have, however, found this line in the IW.ini file. It clearly states it's set up to use ROM, so I tried to mess about with the line changing ROM to RAM, which made the SBOS not start and it gave me this message. I tried searching the installation CD and diskettes for this library, but I couldn't find anything even remotely resembling such a library. So I tried searching the older drivers and found these for Gravis Max. Now that the library is loaded by the SBOS, I get this message. It seems like I'm on the right path when I set up a game though. These libraries probably don't work with the Interwave chip, so I tried searching the web and I found these. However, these seem to be compiled against the official ROM, so the SBOS sounds exactly the same with or without them. I'd need different libraries which I couldn't find anywhere, and that's about it. If anybody here has some different libraries, let me know please. The original or classic Gravis UltraSound was one of the first sound cards that was able to play sounds in 16-bit 44kHz, and of course the plug and play isn't lagging behind with its 48kHz. Aside from that, it's got quite clean output, there's absolutely no problem with sound, no crackling, no hiss, no weird stuff, whatever you play or record it's just working perfectly fine. The Gravis plug and play was also quite popular among the demo scene and tracker music composers. It was mainly because its ability to record and play 32 channels simultaneously, and if you were lucky and had 2 Gravis plug and play cards in one PC, they could do 64 channels together. Now the most important bit of this sound card, MIDI. To me, any Gravis was always the ultimate sound card for games. Well, games the card worked in there was. I always loved its MIDI representation. The Gravis UltraSound Classic, Extreme and Max have half meg of RAM on board and are upgradable to 1MB. The plug and play has 1MB ROM on board and no RAM, but is upgradable to 8MB with 30-pin SIM modules. It of course allows loading high quality instrument patches. These patches work a little bit differently than sound banks of other sound cards such as Sound Blaster or32 or Turtle Beach, which load single large file with all the instrument samples into memory, where they can reach the samples anytime a program asks for any of them. The Gravis plug and play on the other hand offers two systems. It can work either with a single file sound bank or patch files, where one file is a sample of one instrument. The system of patches came from the Gravis UltraSound Classic and it works flawlessly in DOS. I wasn't, however, able to get the card load a single file banks under DOS. Windows, yeah, DOS, no. So it seems like I'm stuck with just the patches. Basic 4MB set of patches that came with the card is good. These patches are basically the same as what you find in the ROM, but higher sampling rate. To be able to utilize all of them at once, you need 4MB of memory, but games usually load only a couple of needed samples into memory, so more than 1MB is not needed. What you need more memory for though are some unofficial patches and sound banks. Most famous are Pro Patches Lite and Utopia. The Utopia is unfortunately a single file bank, so it's out of the question for DOS. To me, the Pro Patches Lite sound best in DOS games, and for some of them 8MB of memory is needed. I tried playing about 100 games with the PNP and the results are gonna be in another 2 videos, as well as some sort of conclusion, because otherwise this video would be too long. So this is the end of this one, and see you in the next one. Cheerio.